I turned 80 last winter. You'd think by now I'd have learned to stop watching the horizon, like some fool still waiting for something to come back to him. But that's the thing about waiting, it becomes part of you, like a shadow you can't quite shake, even when the sun goes down. I live in a small house, just outside Fairview, not far from the old train tracks. They've been abandoned for years now. The rails are half buried under weeds and rust. But sometimes, when the wind is just right, I swear I can still hear the whistle echoing through the valley. It's funny how sound can travel through memory even when there's nothing left to make it. Every morning, I walk down the gravel path that leads to the station. There's nothing much there anymore, just a decaying platform, a faded bench, and a sign that's missing half its letters. But to me, it's sacred ground, because that's where I last saw Eleanor. And that's where my life stopped moving, even as the world kept rolling on without me. It was the summer of 1958. I was 22, working at the lumber yard, earning just enough to keep my old man's truck running and to dream about something better. Fairview was a small town then, smaller than it is now. Everyone knew everyone. The world felt simple in the way only youth can make it feel. Then Eleanor arrived. She came in on the 410 from Street Lewis, wearing a yellow dress and carrying a suitcase that looked too big for her. She was 19, maybe 20, and had come to live with her aunt after her parents died in a car accident. The whole town knew before she even stepped off the train. News travels faster than wind in places like this. I don't know if it was love at first sight, but I remember the exact moment she looked at me. I was leaning against a post near the ticket window, pretending to be busy fixing my watch. She smiled, just slightly enough to turn the air electric. I swear, the sky felt brighter, the world quieter, like even the birds had stopped to listen. We started talking that afternoon. She said she liked the way the hills looked from the station. I told her I'd show her the best view in town, and somehow that turned into weeks of walks, long talks by the river, and dreams we didn't yet know were impossible. Eleanor wasn't like anyone I'd ever met. She was sharp, curious, and always humming some half-remembered tune. She read books about places she'd never been, and when she spoke about them, you'd believe she'd lived there her whole life. I used to think she carried the world inside her, and maybe she did. By August, we were inseparable. I'd never said it out loud, but I loved her. The kind of love that doesn't shout, it just sits quietly in your chest and changes the way you breathe. Then came the day everything turned. Her aunt got sick, badly sick, and the doctor said she needed better care, maybe in the city. Eleanor told me she had to go back to Street Lewis for a while, just until her aunt recovered. A month or two, she said. Maybe 3. We met one last time at the station. She promised she'd write every week. I promised I'd wait for her, no matter how long it took. The 410 train came hissing into the platform. I remember the smell of steam and metal, the way her hair blew across her face as she turned to wave goodbye. "I'll come back to you," she said over the noise. And I believed her. The train left, and I stayed. Weeks passed, then months. At first, I checked the mailbox every day, then every few days. Then I stopped pretending I wasn't waiting. No letters came. No phone calls. No train back to Fairview. People told me to move on. "She's gone, son," my father said. "You can't spend your life at that damn station." But I did. Every Sunday, I walked there at the same hour, sat on that same bench, and waited. Maybe I was a fool, but faith makes fools of all of us at some point. Years went by. Fairview changed. The shops closed, new ones opened. The trains grew fewer until they stopped altogether. The world moved on, but I stayed caught between arrival and departure. Sometimes I'd tell myself she'd had her reasons. Maybe the letters got lost. Maybe she'd found someone else. But in the quiet hours of the night, when I heard the ghost of a train whistle in my dreams, I still saw her face at the window, mouthing words I never heard. And now, almost 60 years later, I still come here, not to wait anymore, but to remember, to honor the man I once was, the boy who believed the world could stop for love. When I turned 30, my father died. Heart attack, sudden and silent, the way he always was. He'd been a railroad man all his life, spent half of it fixing the very tracks that carried Eleanor away from me. I remember standing at his funeral, looking at the station behind the churchyard, and thinking how strange it was that the same rails could carry life and death with equal ease. After he passed, I took over the yard business. The town needed lumber, and I needed purpose. Work became the language I used to keep from thinking too much. There's something about lifting, sawing, building. It gives your hands something to do while your heart stays quiet. I didn't mean to fall in love again. It just sort of happened. Her name was Margaret. She worked at the post office, bright eyes, warm smile, the kind of woman who made everyone around her feel seen. She'd lost her husband in Korea, and we understood each other in that wordless way only broken people do. We got married 2 years later. I was 32, she was 28. And for a while, life was gentle. We had 2 children, a small white house on Maple Avenue, and a garden that smelled like lavender in the summer. But love, real love, never disappears. It just buries itself beneath duty, waiting for quiet moments to rise again. Every evening, after the kids went to bed, I'd sit on the porch and listen to the night trains echo across the valley. I'd tell Margaret they reminded me of my father, but deep down, I knew it wasn't him I was hearing. It was her, Eleanor, the ghost of her laughter, still hidden somewhere between the whistle and the wind. Margaret must have known. She never said it outright, but sometimes I'd catch her looking at me, that kind of soft, wounded look that says, I know where your heart lives, and it's not here. She deserved better than that, but she stayed. She built a life with me anyway. The years went on. The children grew up, moved out, built their own stories far from this small town. Margaret and I grew older, quieter. She'd read in the evenings. I'd fix things that didn't need fixing. We became more like 2 people sharing the same silence than a couple sharing a life. Then one winter, she got sick. Cancer, the kind that creeps in slow and cruel. I spent months taking care of her, sitting by her bedside, holding her hand even when she was too weak to hold mine back. On her last night, she looked at me with that same knowing sadness and whispered, You don't have to keep waiting for her anymore. Those were her last words. After the funeral, I found myself walking without even thinking back to the old station. Snow covered everything. The tracks were half gone, swallowed by rust and time. I brushed the snow off the bench and sat there, just like I used to. The world was silent, the kind of silence that feels like confession. I realized, sitting there in that cold, that I'd spent most of my life waiting for something that was never coming. That I'd built a marriage, raised children, buried parents, all with a shadow sitting quietly beside me, a memory that never aged, never changed, never let me go. But even then, I couldn't hate her for it. How could I? Eleanor never asked me to wait. That was my choice, my mistake, my faith. Some men worship gods. I worshipped a promise. When I turned 60, the county shut the railway down for good. The last train rolled out that spring. Folks gathered to watch, some out of nostalgia, others just for the spectacle of it. I went too. Stood by the platform, hands in my pockets, heart beating slow and steady. When that whistle blew, it felt like a eulogy for everything I'd ever believed in. After that, I didn't come by much anymore. Life had narrowed to its essentials: coffee in the morning, an old record spinning in the afternoon, the quiet hum of days passing like ghosts through an empty house. But even in the stillness, she'd find her way back. A song on the radio, a name on a postcard, a sudden flash of yellow, and for a heartbeat, I'd think it was her. I used to wonder what she'd look like now, after all these years. Would she still have that same laugh, the same way of tilting her head when she was about to say something clever? Or would time have softened her too, like it had everything else? Maybe she'd married. Maybe she'd forgotten. Or maybe, and this is what I secretly hoped, maybe she hadn't. Maybe somewhere, In another town, in another quiet house, there was an old woman sitting by her window, staring at an empty road, thinking of me. It's funny, isn't it? How love can outlive everything: youth, distance, even the people who carry it. When I was younger, I used to think waiting was weakness, but I've learned it's not. Waiting is faith in disguise. It's the stubborn belief that something you once touched, something pure, something true, might still find its way back to you. And so I kept the faith, even when reason told me not to. I turned 80 the year the letter came. By then, I'd stopped expecting anything from the world. My days had fallen into the soft rhythm of old age: a slow walk to the store in the morning, a cup of coffee on the porch, the hum of the radio to keep me company. I'd grown used to silence, to absence. Even the loneliness had a kind of comfort to it. Then, one afternoon, the mailman, a young kid named Jesse, who always greeted me with, "How you doin', Mr. Walker?" came walking up my porch with a small, weathered envelope in his hand. "Looks like this one's been around a while," he said, tapping the corner. "No return address, though. Found it mixed in with the rerouting pile from the county office." It was yellowed with age. The stamp had half faded, and the postmark was barely legible. Street Lewis, 1959. I didn't move for a long time, just held it. The handwriting, the looping, careful script was hers. Eleanor Hayes. My hands shook so badly, I almost tore the flap open. Inside was a single folded page, the paper soft and fragile as dried leaves. "My dearest Samuel," it began. "I'm writing this from a hospital bed in Street Lewis. The doctors say I'll be here a while. I wanted to write sooner, but everything happened so fast after I came back. My aunt passed away not long after we arrived, and I've been sick myself. I don't know how to say this without sounding cruel, but I don't want you to wait for me. You have too much life ahead of you to waste it on someone who doesn't know if she'll ever get well again. Please believe me when I say these past months with you were the happiest of my life. You taught me what love can be: quiet, steady, true. I'll carry that with me, always. If there's any mercy in the world, maybe someday we'll meet again, on a platform somewhere, when time has forgiven us both. Until then, promise me you'll live, Sam. With all my heart, Eleanor." I read it 3 times before I could breathe again. So she hadn't left me. Not out of choice, not out of indifference, but out of mercy, out of love. All those years of silence, of wondering what I'd done wrong, and the truth had been sitting in some dusty mailroom, lost to time. I laughed, and then I cried. The kind of crying that comes from deep inside, the kind you don't even realize you've been holding for half a lifetime. When I could finally stand, I walked out to the old station again. The path was overgrown, the bench almost swallowed by weeds. But the air still smelled the same, of creosote and rain and the faint ghost of steam. I sat there for hours, holding that letter like a relic. The sun went down, the moon came up, and somewhere in the distance, I thought I heard it again, that long, low whistle cutting through the night. For a moment, I closed my eyes and imagined her there beside me, in that yellow dress, smiling the way she did that first day, not young anymore, not a memory but real, present. I said her name out loud, softly, as if the air might carry it to wherever she was now. "Eleanor." And then something beautiful happened. The night breeze lifted the letter from my lap, caught it by the corner, and carried it down the platform, across the tracks, into the dark, like a promise finding its way home. I didn't chase it, I just watched it go. Because for the first time in 60 years, I didn't feel the need to hold on anymore. I realized I'd been living half a life, chained to a moment that never had a chance to end properly. But now I'd finally been given my ending. Not the one I wanted, maybe, but the one that made peace possible. People talk about closure like it's something you can find. But it's not. It's something that finds you when you're finally ready to stop looking. That night, as I walked back to my house under the quiet sky, I looked up and whispered, You kept your promise after all. And for the first time in a lifetime, I didn't wait for the train. I went home. Epilogue. It's been a year since then. The station's finally been torn down. They're building a small park there. Benches, flowers, a plaque with the history of the Fairview line. I donated one of my father's old photographs for it, a picture of the station from the 1940 seconds. Back when the world still felt wide and full of possibility, I asked them to engrave a small line beneath it. They didn't ask what it meant, and I didn't explain. It just says, "For all those who waited for someone who never came and found peace anyway." Sometimes, when the wind's right, I still hear that faint whistle echoing through the hills. But it doesn't ache anymore. It feels like a lullaby now, a song for the life I lived, and the love I never lost. And if there's another world beyond this one, another platform, another waiting bench, then maybe one day, when the last train comes for me, I'll see her again. And this time, I won't have to wait.